sport has an important role here by promoting diverse gender inclusion, to ensure that every Australian fulfils their right to have their life enriched through sport. There are more people than what we thought who have a gender identification which is not aligned with their biological sex. And again, they have rights like everybody else to have their life enriched through sport.
Yeah, Boston, it was one hit after the other. Boston got cancelled, the Paralympics got cancelled, and
and I couldn't believe it. I stuck the ball over the line. I just remember thinking, I made it.
I just guess I felt sort of numb and like something had been ripped out of me. Like I just couldn't really, I didn't know how I was going to keep living. Yeah.
Welcome to Onside, the official podcast of Sport Integrity Australia. Our mission is to protect the integrity of sport and the health and welfare of those who participate in Australian sport.
Hello and welcome to Onside. I'm Tim Gavel. On Onside, our guests have ranged from Olympic gold medalists to sanctioned athletes, CEOs to medical experts. In this highlight episode, we discuss the new gender guidelines for inclusive sport, the role of sport, the challenges of resetting for the Tokyo Olympics, and the dangers supplements pose to athletes' careers. We also celebrate some great moments from sport, this time the 1989 Rugby League Grand Final, with retired Canberra Raider Steve Jackson. In 2019, Sport Australia partnered with the Australian Human Rights Commission and the Coalition of Major Professional and Participation Sports to deliver guidelines for the inclusion of transgender and gender-diverse people in sport. We were joined by the AO's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. David Hughes, to discuss the new guidelines, the issue of getting the balance right between fairness and inclusion, and the relevance for elite sports.
I think it's important that sport at all time reflects what's going on in society and moves with societal changes. I think sport has an important role here by promoting diverse gender inclusion, to ensure that every Australian fulfils their right to have their life enriched through sport. So we have to find a place for everybody. And that document that's been produced by the Australian Human Rights Commission and Sport Australia is really a simple how-to guide for clubs and organisations and anyone really who's thinking about what are the practical steps that we need to take to ensure that our sporting organisation is set up such that people feel welcomed and feel that they can come into our organisation and be welcomed as one of our tribe, no matter what their gender orientation.
High levels of testosterone, it's a big issue in sport. We've seen the Caster Semenya situation. Does this go any way to clarifying the levels of testosterone that should be allowed for somebody to transition across and play in a female sport?
Look, I don't think so, and I don't think that's its purpose. And I think just for your listeners, we need to the issue of intersex athletes who are born female, have always grown up socialised as females, and then after puberty are discovered to have a condition called hyperandrogenism, where they may have androgen levels into the male range. They're intersex athletes. Transgender athletes are athletes who were born and raised as one biological sex but identify with another gender, and who decide to transition across to the gender with which they identify. So they are different issues but related. And I really think the document from the Australian Human Rights Commission and Sport Australia I see as being targeted at the grassroots and for sporting organisations generally. So it certainly has relevance for elite sport, but I don't think its purpose is to try and sort out the sort of complex issues that specifically apply to high performance sport, where there are issues around the balance between getting the balance right between fairness and making sure there's a level playing field in terms of performance and inclusion. And I do think there's the balance and the ratio of risk to benefit is different at grassroots to the high performance level.
You mentioned a moment ago, we talked about intersex and we talked about transition. Even though they're different to a certain degree, you mentioned there that there are similarities, aren't there? Which need to be identified and dealt with through a policy.
Sure, that's right. There are some, and I suppose the similarities are that I think both the intersex condition and transgender issues challenge what has been our sort of, I suppose, our understanding of biological sex over the centuries. We just thought it was so black and white, that you're either male or female and that's it, end of story. And clearly that is not the case. And we've got a growing understanding and a more sophisticated understanding now of that biological sex is in fact a continuum, and there are people, while most people are at either end of being male or female, there is a continuum of people in between who have just as much right to enrich their lives through sport as anybody. And also we understand that there are more people than what we thought who have a gender identification which is not aligned with their biological sex. And again, they have rights like everybody else to have their life enriched through sport. But in both of these issues, if we're talking about high performance sport where there's a lot on the line and it comes down to fractions of a second, etc., then we do have to give some thought to issues of fairness. So clearly you couldn't just have a very competent male athlete transitioning straight across into the female classification without some sort of transition process, because we know that males do on average enjoy a 8 to 12% performance advantage across both endurance and power sports compared to females.
The full interview continues the discussion around the complex issues that specifically apply to high-performance sport, such as the issue of muscle memory after a transition process has taken place, and how much more work needs to be done in including diverse gender individuals fairly in sport.
You're listening to Onside, the official podcast of Sport Integrity Australia.
The COVID-19 pandemic changed everything last year, particularly for Olympic and Paralympic athletes. We spoke to three-time Paralympian Michael Roeger about the impact the postponement had on him. Michael was born without the lower part of his right arm. However, he considers himself to be one of the lucky ones.
I feel like I'm one of the lucky ones. I hadn't had to go through any trauma in my life. I was born like this. I got a twin brother, Christopher, who took me under his wing and didn't treat me any differently, and that was like my community, Langhorne Creek, as well. So I guess there has been difficult times, but most of my childhood was great memories and, just getting in there and giving everything a go. And I think that come from my first passion at AFL, where I could take a mean hanger and hand pass with my stump, and just loved that growing up as a kid.
I didn't think it was... You didn't get pinged by the umpires, did you?
No, I did. I did get done for a throw a few times, and it really used to get up me because I did touch with the stump, and I thought that was a hand pass, but sometimes some umpires weren't so keen on that.
And no doubt a few tall stories told over the years as to how it all happened.
Yeah, I was, just touched the electric fence and my arm blew off, or, a cow stood on it. But yeah, I've got a lot of stories. Shark, crocodile. Yeah, I was fishing up in Northern Territory. But got a lot of stories that I tell. But yeah, sometimes I feel bad because I let them go too far, but I have to bring it back.
Because little kids sometimes don't believe that people are born that way.
Yeah, kids are, they've got no filter, and when you tell them, I was just born without the lower half of my right arm, they're, what? You can't be born like that, can you? So I've got to, make up a story for them to understand.
Michael talks about his greatest achievements, winning gold at the 2019 London Marathon in a world record time, and again at the Boston Marathon when he finished with a time of 3:48 for the 1500 metres, but the event wasn't ratified. He also talks about integrity in para sports and why he thinks Paralympians are less likely to dope than their Olympic counterparts.
First London in 2019 when I, won the World Championships was, it was amazing. It was to run a big city marathon, and that was incorporated as the Para Athletics World Championships. To win that was, something pretty special. And I ran the world record in the 1500 a couple of years before that in Boston. That was in 2015, and today that's probably one of my greatest achievements, only because Philo and I had been training for that record for a long time, and we were so close for a long time. But then to finally do it was, if I could bottle that feeling up and sell it after I crossed that finish line, it would be worth $1 million. And I haven't got that feeling yet, and hopefully I get it again when I win a gold medal at the Paralympics next year.
Now, during COVID, there were no overseas trips, no marathons overseas. So at the same time the Boston Marathon was scheduled, you decided to run around Lake Burley Griffin in April, and you're running amongst people on a bike path, really, aren't you?
Yep, that's exactly right, Tim. And Boston, it was one hit after the other. Boston got cancelled, the Paralympics got cancelled, and I'm a sort of athlete that needs a goal at the end of a hard training block, and so Boston was off, but then Philo and I had the idea to just run a marathon on a Saturday morning around the lake. And I remember that day, it was a beautiful morning, but far out, it was busy. There was like every man and his dog around the lake. And
well, there were dogs, weren't there?
Yeah, there was everything. But that was surprising. Philo sort of just told me to go out there and run 2:30 for the full marathon, and
you ran 2:23.
2:23, which is, in my class in the Paralympics, is no one's run that fast. So I was pretty happy to run that quick in training. We didn't really taper for it, and it just shows that we're in the right space and we're doing the right things.
Because you ran 2:19 at Houston earlier in the year in January, so this was going to be your year, wasn't it? You can see the build-up and you can see the times that you're recording, and suddenly COVID comes and the Paralympics are postponed. How do you recover from something like that?
Yeah, and it just gave me a bit of shivers just when you're just mentioning that, because I really did feel that 2020 was my year, mentally, physically. I feel like I had all my competitors covered. I was mentally ready. I was physically, I felt like I could have done anything this year, and that's been taken away from me. And the tough thing is that fitness, health, one year is not guaranteed the next year. So hopefully this time next year, I'll be feeling as I did in February, March this year, and I can do something special.
Just on integrity in sport and the fact how much work you put into what you do, do you ever have any suspicions that somebody else might be taking shortcuts?
There's always, you always sort of think about that sort of stuff, and I don't just race in the Paralympics, I race with a lot of able-bodied races as well, and it's tough these days because every great performance is always going to come under a cloud because, the sport is moving so fast, and even with, Nike's Vaporfly shoes,
yep.
You think about them, are they fair? Is that integrity in sport? Can they be illegal? Are they illegal? I think technology, drugs, they're pushing the boundaries where, I think that sometimes we should just get back to basics and, running, shoes with no carbon fibre or no, high stack foam. And then with the drug side of things, they're always going to be around and people are always going to be pushing the envelope, especially when there's a lot of money involved in sport.
But in Paralympics, there seems to be less of that, doesn't there? Yeah,
and I think that's a big reason why a lot of Paralympic athletes, aren't leaning towards doping, just because the money is not there as in our Olympic athletes, whereas, they've got big sponsorships, big contracts, bonuses. If they run fast, they get a certain amount of money, whereas the Paralympics is not quite there yet. So the incentive to dope is not there. Even in the Olympics as well, I think the general majority of athletes are doing the right thing, but there's this small minority that aren't, and if we can stamp that out, great. But I believe if we're towing the start line, you want to make sure that everyone's on a fair playing field.
The full interview expands on his first sporting love and what continues to drive him. Each month we celebrate one of the great moments in Australian sport in our segment From the Highlight Reel. And last year we went back over 30 years to reminisce on the 1989 Rugby League Grand Final with retired Canberra Raider Steve Jackson. In extra time, Steve scored the winning try against the Balmain Tigers. Still deemed to be one of the greatest grand finals in rugby league history.
And there it is, 1 point lead to the Canberra Raiders. Meninga's picked it up. Chicken George has got support too. And they're pulled down just, is he almost? He's there! Try! Steve Jackson reached out and scored. What will win the premiership for the Canberra Raiders? I didn't think there was any way he was going to make that, but he did. What strength, what power, what a grand final, what a premiership.
Still brings back some great memories, doesn't it?
It's an awesome, unbelievable. Like I was a kid. I'm back in Mackay these days, and I was just a kid from Mackay. And who could ever think that I'd played in a dream? as a kid growing up, you watch the Sydney Rugby League, New South Wales Rugby League on telly on a Saturday afternoon, watching your Les Boyds and Stevie Rogers, and I was a St George follower when I was a young fella, and to be in one of them games that I used to watch on TV was just remarkable. It's amazing how your life goes, and over the past 30 years, it's just been celebrated over and over. And I got to stand on the football on the arena in front of 83,000 people last year when Canberra played in that grand final against the Roosters. And this game just keeps giving. I love it.
Leading into that try, you had an involvement early in the set of six, and then obviously scored that try. But what was going through your mind? Was it, listen, I'm going to make my mark here, or I'm just going to take my opportunity? Was anything going through your mind?
Yeah, look, I was I knew exactly what position of the game we're in. It was 3 minutes to go. We're leading by 1 point. Mel picks the ball up from an Andy Courier grubber, and he give it to me, and I wasn't going to make a mistake. You know, I've seen on the replay, done a little pirouette. I could have passed the ball inside to Stevie Walters, and he probably would have scored under the sticks. But in my mind, I was just not going to drop the ball, not make a mistake, and just keep running until they stopped me. And after a bit of I run into a couple of players, and then I looked up, I saw the try line there, and I couldn't believe it. I stuck the ball over the line. I just remember thinking, I made it. And I looked up and saw young Bill Harrigan with his arm pointing in my direction. And yeah, it wasn't until later on that night I realised how big a moment that was.
You find yourself you're an educator almost these days, aren't you?
Oh, well, through my experiences, because I was a bit of a naughty boy, you know, and you'll find a lot of them in rugby league circles. You know, we don't dip our toe in the water, we dive in head first. And if you can get through them crazy years and come out the other side, and you become a good teacher, yeah.
We also talked about Steve's post-career transformation and how he now uses his own experiences to help young people.
Rugby league, like I said, it owes no one, and it just keeps giving. And I love coaching young fellas and passing on my experience. I give up the alcohol about 8 years ago, and I used to be a little bit of a naughty boy as a young fella coming through, and I think I'm a pretty good teacher now. I can use my own experiences to help young people that play this game.
So the reason for giving it up, you just felt as though you needed to change your life?
Yeah, well, it was taking control of what I was doing. You know, I when anything ever took control of me, I sort of stepped back and went, you know, what the hell am I doing? And it was pretty difficult because as you come through football, you celebrate your moments, and usually the old Australian tradition is to celebrate with some alcohol. And you know, I was 46-year-old, and my 12-year-old son at the time, I think I had a big night, and the next morning I woke up and I thought, you know, what am I doing? You know, I wanted to be the dad that says, do as I do, not do as I say. And my kids are a very strong part of my life, and probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. So that's the reason I give it away.
A true legend of the game. The full interview also includes a more in-depth discussion about the 1989 Grand Final and Steve's journey leading up to that day.
You're listening to Onside, the official podcast of Sport Integrity Australia.
Finally, Australian marathon runner Cassie Fien was preparing for the Commonwealth Games on the Gold Coast before she was banned for 9 months after the supplement she was taking unknowingly contained a bad substance. In her interview on Onside, she talks about the devastating moment she was told she'd had a banned substance in her system and the impact it had on her career and her life.
Obviously got the call, and I was in a little bit of a daze. I remember the gentleman from Asada kept having to, Cassie, are you listening to me? I've got to tell you this information, and I was kind of nodding along, but not really comprehending what he was saying. And then I went, as soon as I hung up the phone, I went into shock straight away. To the point where, so I went hysterical, to start off with, screaming, crying, just completely out of control, and then all of a sudden I went into shock. So I hit the deck, I could see, I could hear, but I couldn't speak, so I couldn't communicate to people, and they were trying to get things out of me, and I was in my head going, I can see you, I can hear you, but I just can't converse with you. So I was taken to hospital in an ambulance, and eventually the doctors came in and was trying to talk to me, and they wouldn't release me until I could converse with them, and eventually I got a couple of words out, and then I was released into my brother's care for constant supervision for 24 hours. Yeah. So, so I couldn't eat or drink or anything for nearly 3 days, and I just guess I felt sort of numb and something had been ripped out of me. I just couldn't really. I didn't know how I was going to keep living. Yeah.
So you've checked the substance, the hygenamine's not listed on it. Do you feel cheated?
Not cheated, and also not used, but like a false sense of security. They've put something on there that is not what it is actually. It just didn't. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I wasn't a full-time athlete, so I, couldn't have the 4 square meals a day and the sleep after I have a training session, and in that perfect world of an elite athlete, I think what I was struggling with was being an elite athlete, but not having the lifestyle to be able to live like one. So again, you try to find, okay, I can't have that lifestyle, so what can I do legally within my power to try to get my optimum? And that's when I was naive and got drawn into those supplement companies. This will make you recover better, and this will help you training, and this will help you focus, and I did. I'll absolutely admit that I did get drawn into that. You do what you can to try to perform at your optimum within the rules of your sport. There was absolutely no intention behind it from my point of view. I tried to do everything that everything in my power of the rules of my sport, and yet I still went positive, So, but at the end of the day, I guess that's the risk you run. But that can be the same for any food. Like if you put meat in your head that has those extra hormones in it or something like that, is that unfair? Yeah, it probably is too. But I guess yes. What I'm trying to say is I do take ownership, but at the same time, it's just a bit unfair.
Running has always been more than just a sport for Cassie. She had a connection to the sport on a much deeper level.
I just remember when I was at the hospital, I said, I'd make it for you, Dad, and that was about the Olympics, so yeah. So it was obviously really important for me, and running is a connection to him. So it's not just a sport for me, it's way more than that. I talk to him a lot in my head when I'm running, or and that's why I try to take every opportunity I can, because he didn't get the opportunity to do the things in his life that he wanted to do. So I just want to try to get the most out of what I can, and I just that connection for me is when I'm out on the pavement, when I'm running, every single time. Yep.
Cassie also talks about how her life changed after the ban and how it may have damaged her reputation.
To be called a cheat when I didn't cheat, that was probably the most difficult thing for me. I lost my confidence, and my passion out of life went, my purpose out of life went. And, you know, a lot of people could say, oh, it's just a sport, you know, just do something else. But that link with my dad was too much for me. And I, you know, still to this day, it's what gets me up out of bed in the morning, you know, to have something to strive for, and just even the feeling of going out for a run. So, yeah, I had to rebuild my life. I was seeing psychiatrists, psychologists. The last thing I wanted, but I had to be put on medication because I wasn't able to pick myself up. Just the perception of turning up to a race and not having that confidence because thinking that people are looking at me differently. It will never be what it was like before. It's changed, and I may have to accept that. Those in what I call my little running world, my running team, my running family, and they know who they are. I won't name names, but they definitely know who they are. Absolutely stood by my side. Yeah, and if it wasn't for them and their support, I'd hate to think what would have happened.
It's such a powerful story and a warning for all athletes. In the full interview, we discuss Cassie's career so far, what drives her, and her views on supplements. It can be found on our podcast and on our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening to this highlights edition on the Sport Integrity Australia podcast Onside. This year, Onside will continue to raise awareness of ongoing integrity issues, answer your questions, and educate sports and athletes to help ensure the protection and integrity of sporting competitions in Australia are maintained. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to us from for new episodes every month.
You've been listening to Onside, the official podcast of Sport Integrity Australia. Send in your podcast questions or suggestions to media@sportintegrity.gov.au. For more information on Sport Integrity Australia, please visit our website www.sportintegrity.gov.au or check out our Clean Sport app.